Beat out the credible from the questionable. In response, a handful of experts are applying rigorous investigative and scientific standards to evaluate evidence of this phenomena. One of these is veteran journalist Leslie Kane.
I've been looking into the UFO subject for about 10 years, always focused on the hardcore factual information. Radar evidence, the photographic evidence, the physical evidence that have been studied in laboratories, and not on more conspiracy-oriented material that's floating out in the culture and all over the internet. In January of 2007, I was struck by an amazing story that was on the front page of the Chicago Tribune. A number of employees of United Airlines witnessed a disc-shaped object. It looked like a metallic disc hovering over the United Airlines terminal, specifically over gate C-17. And this was at rush hour, a busy afternoon around 4:30. It was seen by a lot of people on the ground. It was seen by pilots, by crew members, by managers, by people that were moving planes around. It was estimated to be about 22 to 88 feet. And they said that it was hovering over gate C-17 for at least 5 minutes. And then the thing suddenly just shot up, directly up through the cloud bank above it, and cut a crisp hole through it, very clean, like a cookie cutter. The witnesses, trained aviation professionals, were confounded by what they had seen.
I've been at O'Hare for quite some time, and I'll tell you definitely it was not an airplane as we know it.
The O'Hare case adds to the growing mountain of UFO data, echoing the common characteristics of earlier UFO sightings. It was a disc-shaped object that hovers silently and accelerates instantly to unknown speeds. But the most critical piece of evidence is yet to be revealed.
Hey Dave, this is from United Tower. Hey, did you see a flying disc out by C-17?
Several months after the incident, Kane obtains a copy of the control tower tapes, which includes a never-before-heard recording of a United Airlines supervisor calling in to report the sighting.
Okay, I'm sorry. What time is it now? Alright, I told Dave there was a disc flying outside above Charlie 17, and he thought it was pretty much high. But, I'm not high and I'm not drinking. Yeah. So I want to see the picture of it. So if you guys see it out there,
A disc? Like a frisbee?
like a UFO type thing. Okay.
I'll keep a field eye for that. Alright,
This is, very, very important evidence. It shows that there was something there. It was reported to the tower, but it was still treated like some kind of a joke. And I believe that that's at least partly due to the FAA policy of discouraging UFO reports. Even though this was in restricted airspace, a busy airport in the middle of rush hour, and nobody knew what this thing was going to do. I mean, this was a serious hazard. So the FAA initially didn't say anything, but once these tapes were released, they had to say something.
Under public pressure, the FAA releases a cursory explanation 2 months after the sighting.
Well, the first thing that the FAA told people was that this was some kind of light reflection off the bottom of the cloud bank. They said it was the airport lights can do funny things on the clouds. But the problem is the airport lights had not even been turned on yet. The second explanation that the FAA gave was that it was a weather phenomenon, most likely what is called a hole punch cloud. A hole punch cloud is a natural phenomenon that is caused by ice crystals falling from above a cloud down to a cloud bank below and melting a hole in the cloud. The problem is you have to have freezing temperatures for this to occur. Well, we know for a fact that it was too warm at O'Hare that day. The temperatures were not below freezing at the level of the cloud bank. So it is an absolute physical impossibility for that event to have been caused by a hole punch cloud. Ultimately, the O'Hare case and the FAA response to it are typical of how the U.S. government handles UFO sightings. First, they avoid having to talk about it at all, but if that becomes impossible, the authorities will just throw out whatever explanation they think might fit, whether it's plausible or not. And it's a real problem. This has happened countless times for decades. It's a standard operating procedure for cases like this.
Despite the current situation, there was a period in U.S. history where open scientific study was encouraged. Sightings were actually welcomed by the government.
For the past 3 years, a large number of perfectly sane and reliable people have been involved in this flying saucer business. We read about them, talk about them, wonder about these reports of strange phenomena in the skies.
I'm inclined to believe that it's of an extraterrestrial origin.
Back in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of sightings that were being reported. There was a lot of coverage in the media, and officials could not figure out what was going on. And this was during the Cold War, so there was heightened concern in the general public about unexplained things in the sky. So the U.S. government set up an agency within the Air Force called Project Blue Book, and its purpose was to take reports from the public and to investigate cases.
Project Blue Book officially launches in 1952, with its 5-person staff receiving over 1,500 reports in the first year alone.
I was driving north on 101 highway at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I noticed a terrific blue flash at the nose of my airplane.
I looked to my right, and there in the sky were 3 tubes of fluorescent light.
And it went over me, practically right over my head. The object traveled in a straight line. I counted 8 of them, proceeding directly out to sea. And I began to hear a whistling sort of a sound.
A beautiful, silvery, pink-tinged moonlight.
Between 1952 and 1969, Blue Book receives over 12,000 UFO reports, nearly 800 of which are unresolved. It is soon clear that the scope of the UFO phenomenon is far greater than the small Air Force office can handle.
Blue Book was plagued from the start. It was understaffed, incompetent in certain ways, and eventually it just became like a public relations exercise for the Air Force. So in 1966, it was decided that its future would hinge on a government-funded study commissioned at the University of Colorado.
The university study is headed by Dr. Edward Condon, physicist and former head of the National Bureau of Standards.
Condon was biased against UFOs from the beginning. In fact, in a 1967 article, he was quoted as saying, "My attitude is there's nothing to it. But I'm not supposed to reach that conclusion for another year."
The Condon Report is completed in 1968 and includes some valuable analysis of unresolved UFO cases in its nearly 1,500 pages. But that goes largely ignored in favor of the 2-page summary written by Condon himself, which declares that further scientific study of UFOs is unwarranted. In 1969, the Air Force announces the termination of Project Blue Book, effective the following month. Since then, the report has been cited countless times by officials and scientists to justify dismissal of UFO study.
It's really a tragedy. I mean, this was the only official investigation by our government. When it closed, the golden age of UFO study in America was over.
Since 1970, many cases have challenged the assertions behind the close of Blue Book. But a 1986 sighting near Anchorage, Alaska would produce standout evidence that demands to be taken seriously.
Yeah, this 1-2 again. On some other equipment over here, we have confirmed there is a flight size of 2 around here, 1550 squad. It looks like he is, yes.
In this case, a captain with 30 years of flight experience puts his reputation on the line by reporting an enormous craft that follows him for nearly an hour. An encounter that would yield the longest recorded data of a UFO to date. Hard evidence that would be brought all the way to the White House.
We were all excited about it. So I said, "What do you think it is?" He says, "Well, it's a UFO."